anyway, what I was going to do today is talk about guitar anatomy and the different parts of the guitar and how they kind of work together, what you can change, what you can upgrade, different things you can do to make the guitar yours. And I thought we'd start off with just the tuners. Might as well start at the top. Tuners, you saw how we restrung there. They're good tuners and they're bad tuners. The bad tuners are the ones that are really sloppy and they don't feel tight and they don't hold the tune very well. Even if you wind them correctly and do everything else, the gear mechanism inside on some is just not as good as others. A good set of tuners, these are Kluson type tuners, and these are nice ones. These have about a 14-to-1 ratio, so you have to turn this 14 times to get this to turn around once. So it gives you a lot of control on it. Works out really well. You said you have locking tuners,
Yeah.
and that's a really good idea too. Not totally necessary, but works out great, especially if you do a lot of bending
Yeah.
and changing the strings, that type of thing, or if you do a lot of whammy stuff.
Actually, mine's been blocked, so that was off. Yeah.
A lot of people do
Well, actually not blocked. It's just been tightened it back.
decked out.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the way, the ones I work on, most people have them that way.
Yeah.
Occasionally they'll want them floating, but I'll get to tremolo in a little bit, but floating can be an issue. But the tuners, I would say, as long as they're holding tune and they feel solid, they're probably okay. But if you do want to upgrade, there's lots of different upgrades, including the locking tuners, including some for strats that are staggered. They're higher here, they go lower down here. All sorts of different options. The next thing we get to is the nut, and the nut is really an important part of the guitar. It's more important than a lot of people think. First of all, it holds the strings in place, which is a benefit. And so when you're making a nut or getting a nut, make sure that the string slots, if they're already there, will fit your fretboard, because there's a lot of different pre-slotted nuts and they're not all the same. You basically want to keep your strings just slightly inside of the frets. You can imagine if this was a little bit wider, you get the strings out farther and they tend to want to slip off the fretboard. So the width this way is important, but most important is the nut height.
So is the nut generally a replaceable part?
Oh yeah, always. Almost always.
Sorry.
Generally.
Yeah, the nut material is also very important. There's a lot of different types of nuts. The real cheap ones are just plastic, and if you take them, you can bend them. They're very flexible. That's not good. What you're looking for is some hardness there. And the hardness has several benefits. One of them is the strings don't dig into it and get down all the way. The other thing is it transfers tone better. It keeps the vibrations into the head of the guitar and in through the neck. And you would think maybe that's only true on the first open chords, and if you played fretted chords, the nut doesn't come into play. It does. And the nut height is very crucial too. And you were saying that when she puts a capo on the first or second fret, she has to retune. And the reason for that is, I'm almost sure, I haven't checked it out specifically, but some of the nut slots are too high. And when you put the capo or fret, you're pulling down the string more than it should. You're stretching that string out, and it makes it go sharp. And when you're open, string is fine. When you fret here, it goes sharp. By the time you get up to the 5th or 7th, it's probably okay because you've negated that extra stretch over enough frets that it's not really taking that into account. So the nut material, very important. The hardest is bone, and it's usually cow bone from the middle of the leg. And I work with bone a lot. When you sand it or file it, it smells like you're in a dentist's office. It gives you that. Gets all of your clothes. It's not pleasant, but it's a very hard material. It works great. I would say it's preferable over almost anything, except if you have a guitar that you do a lot of bending, you do a lot of whammy. There's a couple of materials man-made that are slicker. They're more easier for the strings to move through. And those would be something like micarta. Corian is one. Tusk, T-U-S-Q, is a proprietary material that's very hard and very slick. And that also works very well too. So, but the most important thing is really the nut height and the fact that it slips through there easily. You can take once everything's set up, you can take your string off, take a very sharp pencil, and kind of color in that slot, and put the string back. That coloring in adds graphite to the slot there, and it makes it slicker, and that'll help too. So, any other questions about the nut? All right, and that is replaceable and upgradable. Most guitars, if they're glued in slightly on a Strat, I typically end up knocking it out from this side. On an acoustic guitar, you can sometimes knock it out like this, but generally they come right out, you put a new one in, and you're almost ready to go. Almost, the exception is you'll hardly ever find one that's ready to just drop in and you're good to go. Usually they have to be a little adjusted a little bit, especially the nut slots.
Are they generally a standard width?
No, they're not. There's all sorts of different ones. If you ordered one for a Strat, it probably would be fairly standard, although there's variation even in between them.
Okay.
You can get a pre-slotted one, or you can have somebody like me make one from a solid, hey Scott, from a solid unslotted